This summer, I decided to pick up some graveyard shifts at my current full-time job, simply because it pays more and I'm a university student drowning in student debt. About 3 weeks ago, on the rare occasion that I get to sleep during the time the sun is down, at 3:30 to 4 a.m., I was suddenly awoke by a loud sound. Me being half asleep, I honestly didn't know what the sound was exactly, so I chopped it up to being one of my neighbors dropping something because I live in an apartment with very thin walls, so I just tried going back to sleep. After about 10 minutes of laying there with my eyes closed, I hear the sound again, but this time I'm pretty much awake, so I recognize what the sound was immediately. Someone was knocking on my window. For context, I am a single female living alone in a basement suite, so my windows are basically level with the sidewalk. Anyways, obviously I'm freaked out. I don't know what the heck to do. I don't want to move and make any loud noises so they don't know I'm home, and I'm frozen laying on my bed. Then I hear the knocking again. I instantly bolt up as my fight or flight kicks in and run to the front door, which has my keys with my pepper spray on it. The keys clink together and make a noticeable noise, and the knocking started to get more intense and loud. This is when I realized the window with the screen on my bed is almost all the way open because my cat likes to sit on the edge, and I forgot to close and lock it. I started to freak out already, having a major anxiety. I started looking for my phone, just in case I need to call the police. Me being clumsy and shaking with anxiety, I dropped the phone on the ground, and whoever is at my window proceeds to what sounds like slit his fingernails or sharp object down the screen. I realize this person's intentions are either to come in or scare me, so like an idiot and not thinking, I run to the window as fast as I can and slam it shut, and lock it while avoiding looking outside at whoever it was. The knocking stops, and I wait for about 30 minutes without hearing any knocking. I lay back down and go right back to sleep. The next morning, I honestly couldn't believe that even happened to me. I started to think maybe it was a dream, so I go outside and investigate, and I see an empty beer bottle and a ripped on my blanket. I text my only friend that knows where I live and ask them if they were messing with me. They say no, which I figured because they don't drive and live quite far away, and the bus around my house stops running well before 3 a.m. So I called my landlord and told him what happened. He says to ignore it, and this happened before, which is creepy. Anyways, I obviously recognize now that I should have done a lot of things differently and called the police right away. It hasn't happened since. Nonetheless, still super terrifying, but I can't afford to move again. Years ago, man am I old, but let's say mid-1990s, I worked as a woodland firefighter while in the Army Reserves. I worked as a spotter. Basically, I was stationed in a giant fire tower in the middle of a national park. My job was just as it sounds. I would use binoculars and look out for fire, smoke, other telltale signs of fire. My nearest compadre was 5 miles or so from me. My days consisted of working my shift, taking long walks around the fire tower, being on the lookout for anyone who might be having illegal fires, looking out for wildfire, and staying afoot of bears and wolves. The way our shifts worked back then was 1 week on, 1 week off. So we slept in the towers, cooked our food, etc. One day I came across an illegal bear trap. I had several ranger friends and I safely set off the trap, then picked it up to take to the ranger station on one of my treks out for food in my Jeep. Poaching is illegal in the park and carried a big fine even back then and some jail time, but it did not stop the poachers from trying. I heard rifle shots and headed back to my fire tower. We did have a rifle in the tower to be used in case of emergencies. Just back a few months, a fellow spotter had been mauled to death by a grizzly, so each tower had been outfitted with a rifle. I looked with my binoculars but did not see anyone out in the ordinary. I radioed my coworker Ben, an older guy in the adjacent tower. He hasn't heard anything today, but had come across a few traps himself. That night, after dinner of frank and beans and toast, I was writing to my future wife when I heard the rumbling of a truck. Thinking it may be Ben, occasionally he made the trek over. We would crack open a soda and chew the fat for a bit. Instead, I saw 4 men with rifles get out of the truck. One looked around and leaned up against the truck, while the other 3 grabbed traps and began to set them up. I grabbed the rifle and my lantern and headed down the stairs. I was only 21, a farmer's son from a rural Virginia farming town, and even at one deployment behind me, I was naive. I should have called it in to the Rangers, but instead, I thought I could talk some sense into the four dangerous men. I barely got a "hey, what are you doing" out of my mouth before I was roughly shoved by rough hands. My lantern fell, and I heard it crack. The rifle was kicked away from me, and I felt the breath leave my chest when I was finally kicked in the stomach. I had barely caught my breath when I was grabbed by the two men and was shoved forward into the woods. It seemed like we walked for miles, but in reality it was probably only a mile. However, I noticed that there were no sounds in the forest. In the forest it's rarely silent. Owls, the wolves, crickets, but on this night, nothing. Suddenly I was shoved onto my knees, and I felt hot tears well up. I thought of my parents, my little sister, and my brother, and my fiancée, who were back home in Virginia. I heard the rack of a gun, and I shut my eyes and prayed. Suddenly the night erupted. However, it was the sounds of sirens, those of the fire rangers, and behind them in his pickup, Ben, who had tried to radio me that he had heard a car engine and came to my tower when I didn't reply. The poachers were arrested. Ben drove me back to the tower. I was still shaking. He didn't lay into me for not following procedure. Just said, "That was close, kid." I ended up leaving the job months later to take a job closer to home, but I never ran into any more poachers during the rest of my time. I kept in contact with Ben for a while, sent him a wedding invite, then a photo of my firstborn son in 1997. However, as time usually does, we lost track of one another, and a few years back I googled him. He would have been 75 or so to discover he passed away a few years back. Don't know whatever came of those poachers, but I know I never want to meet him again.